Hello, Patriots, and welcome to the Patriot Dad channel. Today, on episode 2 of Patriot Files, we're going to be doing a remote interview with the rogue dermatologist, Dr. Yuval Bibi. I've been looking forward to doing this interview as it involves the healthcare industry, more specifically, dermatological healthcare, and just getting to learn a little bit more about how the bureaucracy works, about how the relationship between you and your doctors work, and learning just a little bit about how marketing and other things have been used against us to get us to spend an awful lot of money in places that we didn't necessarily need to. So, without further ado, let's get to the interview. I hope you enjoy watching this as much as I did making it. Hopefully you learned something, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So yeah, everyone, just welcome. We have Dr. Yuval Bibi here with us today. So welcome, Dr. Bibi, to the chat. I appreciate you spending some time with us today to answer a few healthcare-related questions and maybe give some insights to people to help them understand why things sometimes don't really make sense when it comes to healthcare and medical care in the United States. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me on, Patriot Dad. It's great to be on your channel. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. So, yeah, in general, I think a big thing that many people don't maybe understand so well is maybe some of the impacts that the changes in some of our healthcare regulations, insurance policies, and some of those, and how those might have actually impacted both their cost and what it's like when you go to, your doctor and you want to actually get some medical care. How that actually has affected us over the last couple of decades. There's been some pretty significant changes in our system.
What we have been seeing over the past few decades is nothing short of staggering. And what we've been seeing is expansion of what was originally Medicare and the Medicare format, where a central authority mandates and rations and controls the provision of medical goods and services to a certain part of the population, a certain demographic. We've seen a staggering expansion of that model to the wide population on an unprecedented scale. So Obamacare did a few things that were very unusual or very new to the American landscape, and that is to first of all mandate that people buy into the healthcare insurance industry, meaning they actually made people buy the products or they were fined. And that fine was rescinded back in 2019 on the federal level. But there are some still states in the union that require people in or residents of those particular states to hold some sort of insurance or pay taxes towards a communal insurance in those states. So that model has, while it was mostly withdrawn, is still in play in several states in the union, California, for example, New York, and others. Of course. And that, by the way, changed the psyche of the population, meaning a lot of people who would not have dreamt of buying insurance prior to the Affordable Care Act have suddenly been forced to buy insurance, and many of them just held on to it as a habit, meaning just losing sight of what insurance truly is, and we'll get to that in a moment. So Obamacare, first of all, mandated the purchase of the insurance, or so-called insurance. We'll see how that's not insurance at all, but it mandated purchasing or buying into the healthcare system by a very large portion of the population that would have never been participants in the first place for various reasons, for personal considerations. And in addition, it also canceled what was previously called pre-existing condition clauses or exclusions, which meant that the insurance companies actually had the authority to decide who it is going to be, who it isn't going to be their customers. So traditionally, and
Real quick before that, so an insurance company, let's say you didn't have insurance and you contracted cancer or you got in a catastrophic car accident, there was some underlying thing that you had. You couldn't just go to the market and say, hey, I want insurance now.
right,
And the insurance company
right,
had the authority at that point to say, no, you already were in the car accident. That's not insurance. I don't have to give you this product. But
correct,
that changed.
correct.
So that
That
changed with
changed.
Obamacare.
That's correct. That changed. And the ramifications of that change is that, first of all, everybody who wanted to be insured or did not actually, everybody was covered all of a sudden by those insurance policies. And that meant that some of the resources that were held by these companies had to be split between or amongst more policyholders or more covered people.
Yep.
So, and obviously the expenses grew as people with more problems were waved into these programs. And those insurance companies were tasked with provisioning those services, those goods and services. There were heavy government subsidies, and obviously a lot of government help to make sure that these companies stay afloat and continue to play the game of the exchange, meaning providing those Obamacare policies to the general public.
Yep.
A lot of them subsequently exited the exchange, by the way, as matters became a lot less financially convenient. But the true bottom line is that, first of all, the cost of healthcare per person grew. It grew for various reasons. First of all, those companies needed to provide more services to more people that they would never have been required to produce prior or to provide prior. And that resulted in their having to spend a lot more money and at the same time having to charge higher and higher policy rates from the rest of the participants to make up for the expenses. The other thing is when you get a third party between doctors and patients on a wide scale, what happens is that you basically introduce a third, fourth, fifth, however many people are involved in the transaction into the mix. And that by default makes it more expensive. These people have to eat, they have to get paid, and they have to find something to do.
Yeah, and we've
So
seen that in the
there's
education industry too, right? As they added levels of
Mhm.
bureaucracy to anything, the increases
That's right.
is always an expense to us at the end. But the
That's
interesting thing
right.
is, it seems like that drastically shifted the relationship between the patient and the doctor. It's no longer just me going to you and saying, "Hey, I need you to check out a mole." It's not me saying, "Hey, I've got this, itch or a dry thing," or it's just, "Hey, I can't just go to you now. Now you have to make sure you're in compliance with the government." So
Right.
that
And
third party in there kind of interrupts that relationship, it seems like.
well, it's more than interrupting the relationship because let's take a look at the mechanics of what's going on here. Who's paying you, the physician, when you take care of that patient? Certainly not the patient. The patient is liable or responsible for the copay in some cases. Some cases there are no copays and there's no out-of-pocket cash exchange between the practice and the patient. In many cases, the bulk sum of the money paid to the physician comes from the insurance company. Who's paying the physician? The insurance company does. Who's telling the physician under what conditions and under what circumstances they're going to get paid? And what is it that they need to do? That's the insurance company. Same as Medicare, by the way. Medicare is the one paying physicians who accept Medicare, not the patients directly, even though you'd say, well, that's the patient's money. They contributed. They bought into the system. They paid taxes all their lives. The bureaucrats paying the money to the physicians are in charge. They can decide to deny payment to the physician, and then the physician doesn't get paid. The patient is not responsible for the money paid directly to the physician. So whoever controls the money exchange controls the interaction, literally and figuratively. And what you have is exactly as you were alluding to. You have physicians that are beholden to the system, even though there is a legal obligation on the physician and a moral obligation on the physician to be responsible to the patient, which the physician does. And most physicians, as far as I know and am concerned, are working under that paradigm. But at the same time, they are beholden to get paid by the bureaucracy. And that puts a whole new strain that was not on the interaction prior to the very widespread of the so-called healthcare insurance.
The way you're talking about it makes it sound like it would be difficult for a physician to want to accept Medicare, but also difficult
Right.
to not accept Medicare.
Right. Yeah, that's very true because as the intellectual Dennis Prager says, people yearn for comfort. They don't yearn for freedom, and the yearning for liberty or for freedom is not necessarily a natural human instinct. People want to be taken care of, and I think that Medicare. And by the way, there was much opposition to Medicare back in the day. The 1960s were a very different time, and the American psyche was very different. But after having been baked for many decades in the milieu of Medicare, of the environment and the model that it provided, people have gotten accustomed to accepting Medicare payments and accepting Medicare patients. And those patients, by the way, those patients require, I think that was probably one of the biggest leverages for people to have been able to have passed Medicare at the time. They said, well, don't you want to take care of the elderly? And of course you want to take care of the elderly. Who doesn't want to take care of the elderly? I do. I certainly do. And I love seeing Medicare patients. And I really appreciate seeing those folks because I love that I'm able to take care of them. And at the same time, the money that those folks paid into the system is being mismanaged. The care, the medical care that those folks are receiving is being muddied and being compromised by a bureaucracy that decides what kind of medical care, what kind of medications, what kind of procedures those patients are going to receive and at what cost, and that limits their options remarkably. So, to answer your questions, yes, it sounds like a very tough thing for physicians to accept. I think there was a long time conditioning of American physicians to accept that kind of framework, that kind of model.
Yeah.
Obviously, the initial phases of Obamacare, at least for many physicians, were sort of streamlined. So the sheer incompetence and inappropriateness of the whole model did not become apparent until a few years after. But then the money starts running out, and
Yeah.
bureaucratic issues start to creep in, and the bureaucracy continues to grow. And all of a sudden, you're in this paradigm where you're handcuffed to those companies that are providing less and less services, less and less leverage for your money as a policyholder, and less payments for your services as a physician. And that is one of the major causes for discontentment amongst patients and amongst physicians. You're basically paying these very high fees and premiums, and you're getting paid less and less for your work.
Yeah.
And everybody's wondering, where's that money going? Well, the money is going to the middleman, which is imposed on everybody to manage their affairs completely without merit, by the way. The middleman does not really add anything to the mix of value.
No, he
And that's
steals
what
from
people
both
need to
sides, it
understand.
seems like.
Yes, absolutely.
So if it's causing compensation to go down and the cost of education has been going up, it also seems like this would kind of drive it so that fewer and fewer people are going to be physicians. It's kind of anecdotal, but at least in my area, it seems like it's getting harder and harder to find doctors that are accepting new patients. And the ones
Mhm.
that are trying to get on their schedule, especially right now for pediatrics, it seems like it's 4 to 6 months out if I want to have a scheduled appointment with a lot of these physicians, which tells me the system needs more physicians. But
Right, right.
if this compensation issue and this complexity and high friction environment isn't addressed, do you see a lot of people being interested in being doctors?
Well, that's so it's an interesting question. It has multiple aspects to it. The answer does. So the shortage of physicians is, first of all, both in pipeline physicians actually being churned out, coming out of medical school. Those numbers are not growing in sufficient enough quantities to provide for the growing population, especially with large immigration into the United States. You have other concerns and obviously an aging population. But the other thing is, which is really interesting, when you get bureaucracy in the form of healthcare insurance or so-called healthcare insurance companies, they're not really healthcare insurance. They're not providing real leverage in most instances, but they are middlemen that require busy work from patients and physicians to carry out their task and practice medicine. When you add the Medicare and Medicaid layers of bureaucracy on top of the work of the physician, what are you doing? You're cutting into resources on a global scale, but you're cutting into the time that a physician is able to spend with their patient. There's only so many hours in the day. If I, as a physician, am busy filling out paperwork for, say, 20, 30, 40% of my time, and many physicians are tasked with that proportionality of busy work by the bureaucracy, if you're spending that much time on filling out paperwork, making phone calls, making sure that the services are honored and provided, making sure that you get paid, and on top of that, you have to pay a whole cadre of staff to carry out another layer of bargaining with the bureaucracy. You're going to be fresh out of time to see patients eventually because you're dealing with treating the needs of the bureaucracy.
And maybe
So,
that's a quick question that maybe has a little bit of a more brief answer would be in your day or in an average physician's day, how much of your day is actually spent seeing patients versus all of your other responsibilities like you just laid out?
yeah, that's a very interesting question. Obviously, varies from day to day, but I'd say on average, it's around for paperwork, documentation, charting, and other busy work related to dealing with insurance companies. I'd say I'm spending around 20% of my time doing that. We are highly efficient where I work, highly efficient. We have excellent staff. I am well versed in handling matters in the system. I've been in the system for a while, and so are many of my colleagues. It still does not take away from the fact that these are just physically requiring tasks. You have to sit down and do the task to fulfill the obligations to make it go through.
Yeah.
So
I
if
mean,
you want to write a
that's
prescription or
basically out of a
prior
5 day
authorization.
week, you're spending a day of your 5 day week doing paperwork.
Absolutely. You're spending a significant chunk of time. Now, another layer of this is that the fact that and people are physicians are obviously many of them are highly conscientious people, and patients come into the practice to seek medical care with their lives on the line. It's not a joke to see a doctor, and in most cases people come in with very serious problems. Now, imagine that you're dealing in these very high stakes matters and you're being burdened by these bureaucratic tasks. Now, that takes the wind out of a lot of people's sails. It demoralizes a lot of physicians, it demoralizes a lot of patients, by the way, and people become less and less energized, less and less motivated to do more work as they realize that the people they're working for have no interest in the interaction and the outcome of the patient or how well the patient's going to do. And in the meantime, the physician and the patient are left on the line and are responsible, 100% responsible for what's going on. Obviously, the patient ends up with the real ramification. The physician obviously is right next to the patient, and the physician and the patient end up carrying all this burden, all this water for the bureaucracy, and that can be very demoralizing. So it can slow down work for physicians. It can actually make people slow down their practice completely and categorically, and it can make people quit. So you have people that are looking for other streams of revenue, shall we say,
Yeah.
outside of medicine, people looking to get out of medicine altogether, and many people actually checking out of medicine. And considering the fact that it takes years or even decades to train a physician, being a physician is ongoing training your entire life. You keep learning new things, you keep meeting new people, and finding out new problems that come on the radar, and you have to treat them effectively. This is an ongoing, lifelong mission, and you have people who basically up and quit in their 50s or their 60s, which are still, believe it or not, the prime years for many physicians. The physicians that I worked with as a trainee, I've had physicians that carried on until they were in their 80s, and they did a great, excellent job. These people were as sharp as tacks, and
Yep.
they loved working. They loved coming to work, and they loved working with the patients and providing solutions to people at their utmost desperate times and really getting them out of those blunders. That is becoming a bigger and bigger burden, I imagine, on many physicians in the United States.
Yeah, just trying to comply with a lot of those, especially as a more elder physician. If you haven't been used to that process, when they start adding more of that bureaucratic layer, it's probably pretty demoralizing. They just want to show up to work, do good things, help people. Like I remember my physician, my pediatrician growing up was a fairly old gentleman. He was a really great pediatrician though. Yeah, if you added
Yes.
all this on top of that, he probably wouldn't want to do it either.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, are you still, or is that pediatrician still seeing
Oh,
your family, or?
I haven't tracked him in a while. Like he was my pediatrician, I think, until I was 18, basically. Because at the time, you weren't a kid anymore when you were 18. Unlike now, I think it's 25. You're allowed to be on your parents' insurance as a child.
Yeah, yeah. I think 25 or 26, but yeah.
So is
So,
there
and
is there a way then with the way that insurance works and all the other kind of higher friction interactions, is there a better way maybe if you just have something simple that you want to get seen? Is there a way to do that like cash only? Is there a way to do that like that's less of a burden to the physician that maybe would be a better way to have that relationship? Or is the bureaucracy kind of mandated this high friction interaction?
yes, that is a complicated question. The short answer is that yes, well, cash payments to physicians make matters much simpler for the patient and the doctor. The problem with cash prices is that most people are not used to paying out of pocket for medical services. There's several layers of problem here. So, first of all, the rates that physicians charge for cash payments seem excessive to many people who are used to paying copays or not paying at all out of pocket for the services. Those rates have increased over the years because, again, you have to pay for overhead. The overhead is mandated by, if you're a practice, so if you're a completely cash practice, yes, your overhead is going to be fairly low, I imagine, and you are going to be able to charge whatever prices the market is going to find reasonable, and that's going to be fine. If you're a physician working for a practice that is accepting insurance, your rates are going to be very similar to the rates that you charge the insurance companies. Of course, there are some mitigating factors that can be implemented, but generally that makes it for pretty steep payment out of pocket. It does make things much simpler for the physician and the patient, certainly. As far as paying for procedures as you go, physicians are restricted by insurance companies from providing certain services. Obviously, there are certain services that you cannot provide the same day as a physician for the patient for various arbitrary reasons. So cash is king. It does simplify things dramatically. Of course, when you get to the high ticket items, if you're actually in the hospital or if you get very expensive treatments, then the cost of those treatments is just stunning, astronomical in many cases. And one of the reasons for those increased costs, again, is the involvement of big money interests in the system that are baked into the cake with rates that are determined by virtually unaccountable bureaucrats. They're determining those prices and those rates in boardrooms, and patients get slapped with those rates, especially in the big institutions.
Yeah, I've looked at some of the I forget what they call them, but when you get them in the mail, breaking down your costs, and you look at the
Mhm.
rate for certain services, and then you have the negotiated rate for whatever your insurance company is. And I've seen some outrageously different numbers where like a service will be like $800, but then the negotiated rate, because you're with Blue Cross or Aetna or whoever your provider is, it's like, oh, it's not $800, it's 110. And you're like, says who? Like, how is it that much less just because it's the negotiated amount? If it's 110 bucks, why isn't it just 110 bucks? It seems, I don't know, arbitrary and crazy to me at the end user level.
Yeah. And it is arbitrary. And you want to call it crazy? Yeah, it is crazy, but mostly it's arbitrary because those numbers are decided between people who never see the paying customer, they never look him in the eye, and they never have to explain any of those decisions to anybody. So the physician in on the front lines, and by the way, God bless the staff at the front desks, and people at obviously billing departments, and probably a nurse. Those are the people, and the medical assistants, by the way. So all these people get to be confronted about those payments. I mean, every one of those professions has been confronted by patients over the steepness of the payments.
Yeah, some
And
outraged
yeah,
customer.
that's right. But I'll bet that the CEO of a hospital has never had to do that. If they would, it would be very unlikely, a very unlikely scenario,
No.
obviously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately, we did have one incident of some vigilanteism on that front. What was it, late
right.
last year? But yeah, overall, you're right. Like, there's very little. It seems like there's very little end accountability for the people setting those prices. But we keep paying them. But
Absolutely.
we keep paying the
Absolutely.
insurance. It's interesting you went over that a little bit, is that the customer doesn't actually give the money to the doctor. There is this unaccountable third party, basically, that you pay the insurance pays the doctor. But because that relationship isn't direct, the amount you pay the insurance doesn't necessarily match the amount that the insurance pays you. It probably doesn't, because they've got to pay their costs. So they're
Mhm.
collecting probably more money than they're paying out in order to maintain some profit. It's an interesting mechanism. It sounds a lot like the way the federal government and the budget works, right? Like they print money to pay for stuff, and then they tax you and they just burn the money to try and control the money supply. But there's this disconnect. A lot of people think that your taxes pay for things the government does, just like people, I think, believe that those payments you're making to your insurance company is directly paying the healthcare provider. And it sounds like that is just not the case.
Yeah, it's not the case, and not only is it not the case, the insurance companies are actually mandated to spend a certain amount of their revenue or their income on healthcare. Now, what do you think that got the insurance company to do? Well, the insurance companies are basically increasing their premiums because they want to pay more money to their staff, their bureaucracy, their infrastructure. Their CEOs are making big money. So to make up for that restriction, they're raising the premiums, and there's another layer right there. And the lack of accountability is, I think, what's really driving this entire thing, this entire model. And and you were talking about something really interesting. The United States is currently, well, first of all, we're what, $36 trillion in debt, if not more, and
And growing
the amount,
fast.
and growing fast, and we're just sprinting our money out of it, which is an impossibility, obviously. And I think because a lot of people talk about yearn for systems, for healthcare systems in other countries.
Yeah.
And I think what they don't realize is that other countries do not have the circumstances of the United States. They don't have the amount of money and resources that is commanded by the US government that is underwriting the whole thing at the expense of the taxpayers. So other governments have to make do with far fewer resources. They obviously, their systems are not perfect, but they don't have a lot of resources to play with, and they don't have much of a free market, or compared with the United States, their free markets are fairly restricted. So there isn't really a whole lot of money to mine out of the system. The United States, on the other hand, has what seems it is not, but what seems to be to a lot of people virtually limitless amounts of money and resources. This is not true, but that's the illusion that many people are living under.
Yep.
And then we have a government apparatus that has contracted for-profit organizations to carry out its charges and put on other regulations on them. But these companies are not stupid. They're very big and wily companies, and they are making what they are chartered to do, which is to provide the government's charges and regulations and collect a payment and make profits. So this is something very unique. This is something that I don't know exists anywhere else in the world. You have this seemingly limitless amounts of money
They sure treat it that
funneling.
way.
Yeah, well, they sure treat it that way, exactly. And you have this unaccountable government bureaucracy that just kind of just doles out money to contractors on the outside that are tethered to the government through regulation and subsidies. So that is, I think, one of the reasons why healthcare has ballooned as it has in the United States, especially the bureaucratic element, because there's money to feed it. In other countries that are not, first of all, I mean, even if they do collect foreign aid from the United States, that still is dwarfed compared with the federal budget and the amount that the federal government and state governments can dole out to insurance companies, and the amount of money to be made in the United States, not to mention that there is foreign investment into the country. So there's a lot of money in this river that does not exist anywhere else. And there is, again, the government, and there's a free market that actually allows for innovation. And unfortunately, in this case, the innovation, which was completely synthetically powered, has ballooned into what we're seeing today, which it seems, I mean, if you look at just the ingenuity of what's happening here, it's quite genius. These are devices or machines to just milk out taxpayer money
Yeah.
and execute the charge of the government, which and call itself healthcare.
Yeah, and
So that
it's
is,
the amount of mandatory spending that is in our annual budget, which encompasses Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which are the just ginormous entities. The amount of resources that go into those things for the outcomes we get, it seems mismatched. And I think
I
it
know.
seems like the inefficiency there, I think, is like you were saying, it's this growing bureaucracy that is consuming those resources. So we are just cutting blank checks and printing money to feed these programs that sound very good on their surface. You mentioned earlier, everybody wants to, get on board with helping the elderly. And you also see that excuse in a lot of these programs for helping the very young. They always try and use your emotions and tug on your heartstrings to support them doling out far greater and greater amounts of resources to support these programs. But then that is just feeding this bureaucratic growth. And if that's all we're doing is feeding bureaucracy and we're not actually putting money into outcomes, it seems like those programs, I don't know if they shouldn't exist, if they just need to be reformed and so they exist in a more efficient and better form, but it does not seem sustainable. And you were saying, we're a nation that's different than most. We have much more resources than most. We don't have these restrictions because as the world reserve currency, we can, for now, get away with just printing more. But why are we printing more to feed this beast? It seems a little crazy. I don't know. We don't necessarily need to get
Absolutely.
into that, but it just
No,
seems
I
like
my
we're also feeding a bureaucracy instead of just feeding common sense. And my VA doctor is really interesting. He's all about losing weight, exercising, trying to manage your health in ways that, to a common person make sense. Like, hey, move more, eat less. You want to lose weight, makes sense. Skincare stuff, maybe, you talk in your videos a lot about how people use abrasives, they over cleanse and then they have to over moisturize. So
Mhm.
we're consuming all of these resources in these things for what? So when we have common sense like that, it seems like if we could push more of that with policy, with culture, hey, have a little more personal responsibility, do things that make common sense. Instead, what do we see? We see Ozempic rise to the forefront. Take the easy way out. Don't worry about having responsibility or accountability. You see the big push in skincare or in dermatology is, oh, you need this cream, you need these moisturizers, oh, you need to scrub more, oh, more sunscreen. There's always an answer, but for some reason, the answer is always to buy at least one, probably two or three products that are mostly pharmaceutical products. It's just consuming even more resources. Like,
Mhm.
is there a reason behind that? Is there a reason that we see a lot of this push from the physician side, or maybe it's more from the insurance side towards medicating and pharmaceuticals instead of my physician does, or you see RFK Jr. talk about, he is more about, hey, healthy. Let's try and make America healthy again. Let's try and use common sense and cut down on that thing. Like what is driving this push towards Ozempic, towards the commercialization of just everything.
Yeah, first of all, that's a great point that you're raising. That's all this nonsensical lack of common sense in so-called policy. And I think we need to look at the bottom line. Who's getting paid, who's making money, and what is this driving? And I think that the major results of government policy across many different areas has been to make people less well off, more poor, less healthy, less educated. And I think that tells you something about the lack of accountability of government at this level to its own citizens. And that's, by the way, that's not because the government is evil or because the bureaucrats are evil. This is human nature. When you remove someone from accountability directly to other people in their community, they begin to behave accordingly, especially if they're well rewarded for it. So I don't blame the people sitting there for behaving the way that they do, but I think the structure is simply a structure that doesn't work. It doesn't work for the common individual citizen that's tax paying and law abiding and maybe is trying to own a home or owns a home and trying to run a business or just trying to get by and have a family. That does not work. And I think what really needs to happen is that we need to restore accountability and, more importantly, agency to the individual. And that's what this country was founded on, really. Not acquiescing and not remanding accountability and responsibility and agency to a foreign or to a removed and detached form of government. That's exactly what the founding of America is about. And I think that this is beyond just talk. I think that if you actually remove those government agencies and government apparatuses from the equation, and you can do that by deregulation and by defunding of those agencies and restructuring of many of the workings of these agencies. And I'd say many of them are redundant. But what you are doing is, first of all, you are lowering the tax burden because there's not as many taxes required to actually keep the system running. And you're not printing as much money because you don't need to, again, fund that system. So you are cutting down on expenses significantly. You're cutting down on expenses in the way people have to deal with the bureaucracy. This is beyond healthcare, by the way, but certainly in healthcare. And the other thing is you have people more wealthy and with more time and resources on their hands to, first of all, educate themselves with less of an inclination or less of a pipeline to spend their resources on mandated things or things that are just delivered to them through the government apparatus. So they'll be doing their homework a whole lot more attentively, and they'll be looking at the fine print of the products and the services that they contract to make sure that they're getting the highest quality that they can afford. Now, everybody's a little different, obviously. I don't expect everybody to make awesome decisions 100% of the time. We are all human. We all make mistakes. But at the same time, you get to own them and you get to learn from them. And you need to, and many people, when they actually get in that situations of managing their own personal affair at almost 100% level, they become a whole lot more responsible, a whole lot more conservative in their rationing of their resources and their allocation of resources, their management of what they have, and they become a lot wiser. Now, not everybody grows at the same rate. Not everybody makes great decisions. And even sadder or more tragic is that very smart people can make very bad decisions on occasion and end up falling flat on their face. I think everybody that we know in life has been there. Everybody, period. People make bad decisions, and sometimes they're not even aware that they're bad decisions. But at the same time, living in a community to which you're accountable without the involvement of some uninterested third party also creates relationships for when you fall down on your face. You can go to church or you can go to temple, and you know people around you. You know your neighbors. You knock on their door. You say, "Hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar?" The proverbial cup of sugar or whatever it is that you need. And there's a whole lot more likelihood of forming close ties in the local community and spending your money on the local community and having more money to spend, by the way, because you're not being taxed by some unaccountable third party from out of town.
Well, it also seems a lot of what you just said and the things that I kind of think about a lot are most of that centralization and federalization of a lot of that authority and power is being driven by a sense of fear. People are
Mhm.
being told you need this big entity called the National Institute of Health, or you need all of these things because they will take care of you. Don't
Right.
worry. But the implication in that is if they didn't exist, that you as the physician or whoever it is that is the currently regulated body is by nature evil and wants to harm you. So the implication simplification is if the National Institute of Health didn't exist, if these big medical boards and insurance companies didn't exist, that you as the physician would be trying to serve your own best interest by harming your customers. Like they're driving this fear where like we must exist to regulate and control your physician so that you
Right.
get a better outcome. And to
Right.
me, I don't know why somebody would want to go through life with that viewpoint of always being afraid. It's maybe that's why people that are conservative tend to be more healthy.
Mhm.
That level of fear can't be good for you. If you're always
Yeah.
living in fear of everything unless the government is saving you from it, like that sounds miserable.
It is miserable. And you know what's interesting, Patriot Dad? This is such a great point because when you look at the relationship of the physician and the patient, and we did talk earlier about that relationship and how it's being incorporated into the fold of the corporations or the government under Medicare, under the guise, and by the way, there's other organizations that are NGOs and nonprofits that do very similar things, kind of take care of the quality of the interaction, make sure that physicians behave. And what's interesting is that physicians still remain the sole party who is responsible for the outcome, legally speaking, which is fine by me, by the way. I think that you're a professional responsible for the delivering of your craft and your technique and technology, and you're charged with making people better or helping them through very tough times. So that is something that's a given. You are accountable for that, and to think that physicians would not in any way be interested in the well-being of their patients is ridiculous because the reputation of a physician hinges on that, on the outcomes of his patients. The reputation of a physician hinges on his bedside manner. The reputation of a physician hinges on how well he treated the family members of the patient. And genuinely at that, you have to be genuinely interested and love the people that come into your clinic. You have to, or people will know that you're not a person they can trust and they cannot come into your practice in good faith and receive services from you in good faith. This is the basics of a small business and a one-on-one interaction between people. You have to trust someone, especially when you hand your life and your most prized possession, which is your body, to them to help you take care of it. That's something that goes without saying. Not to mention the fact that physicians traditionally are people who do take an oath. I take it very seriously. Do first, do no harm, and then treat the patient through the toughest of times in their lives and help them through it to the best of their ability. These are things that, as far as I know, I've not seen a physician that had not taken it seriously, whether it's by faith in God, charging you to take care of the patients where you're a vessel in the hands of God, or through sheer principle of wanting to do the best job that they can do by their patients. And to think that a third party inserting itself between the physician and the patient is going to make matters better is preposterous. And I'll tell you what else is preposterous here. Third parties injecting themselves between the physicians and the patients are distracting physically, just on pure physics, are distracting the physician and the patient from focusing on the interaction, meaning they are by design and by default making the interaction less focused and likely erode the quality of the interaction. And they are distracting in the sense that they're busy physically taking care of other tasks that they're speaking to each other, like filling out paperwork or worrying about the insurance company. And they're distracting in the back of the people's minds. They're on people's minds in other ways.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is an invisible force between the physician and the patient that does not actually increase the quality of the interaction between the physician and the patient, and certainly does not care for the interests of the patient. They don't know the patient. I know the patient.
Yeah.
And they don't know me either. And they don't know any of the people involved in the interaction. They're people who are very far removed from it. So again, this is not a vilification of these people. It's just that the assumption that they can actually do you better or one up you on the quality of an interaction between two people is absolutely preposterous. It's absurd. This is an absurd assumption. And I think that through your and my discussion here, people may actually open their eyes and see that this is absolutely preposterous.
It would almost be like having a third person in the room with you during your physical exam that's like sitting in the corner with a little clipboard and they're just watching you do your job and they're watching me on the table. And it's like kind of like when a therapist is writing notes in their book
Mhm.
and everyone's worried, oh, what's he writing? Is that a
Mhm.
negative thing? Did I do something wrong? Like it's
Mhm.
probably not that overt or direct. But when you need to worry about, am I going to run afoul with something that the insurance company won't like, or one of the licensing boards, or something like that? And then I'm in there just saying, I just want this thing looked at. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
why I can't get the thing I'm asking for. And you might be restricted from giving me directly the thing that I want because my insurance company has decided that it doesn't want to do that. It wants to, instead of giving the thing I want, it has an alternative treatment that is required based on that it will pay for, and it won't pay for the thing that I want. So it's this third
Right.
person in that room that they're not physically actually there, but I think a lot of people would probably have a little more understanding and compassion, both for the physician and for themselves, if they just kind of looked at it that way. I hadn't really thought about it. But yeah, it's basically a third person in the room during your exam that's really paying attention to every part of that interaction.
That's correct, but arbitrarily so. So not really in a very personally tailored manner. There's just these checks and balances or these hinges that you have to pay attention to in the room. But those hinges are not alive. There's no interaction. There's no really reasoning with those hinges or with that person. That person just adds another layer between you and the patient. So, and an arbitrary one at that. So not really a conscious or an intelligent one. And I'm not saying, again, this is not anything. And it's not so much that I don't want to offend anyone. I just want to make sure that this is not a view of this element as an immoral element. It's an amoral element. There's no morality to it. It just hangs there. It does its job like a machine, and that's pretty much it. And I think, by the way, that's something that just occurred to me. The people who are down on the ground at the insurance companies who have to take the telephone calls. Yeah, I'll bet you a lot of these people are not doing well. I'll bet you. It's not, it's just something that just occurred to me that being a person who picks up the phone at the insurance company is not a happy place to be. It's not a good job to have as far as the experience of the person doing it.
It's like most customer service job, especially telephone bank type jobs. Like you're dealing with people that are almost always upset. They're probably having one of the worst days of their life. And from a medical insurance perspective, you're also dealing with people that may or may not be dealing with a deceased relative or some catastrophic event in their life. So it's worse than like calling the cable company. Like you have a whole different level of stress there. And yeah, I can't imagine that would be a very pleasant job either. And you kind of mentioned something that really touched home with me is that these insurance companies are also very large corporations. I've worked for those. And most of the decisions that get made on a daily basis are set by policy. There's not a lot of flexibility in it. So, as a human being in those positions, you not only are getting the receiving end of somebody who's upset with you, but you are constrained by policy. You are not allowed to be human at all. You just have to read the script and tell the person the thing that they probably don't want to hear. Just like at my job, there's ways I would rather do certain things, but it's not the policy of the corporation that I work for. And I'm constrained by that in the same manner. And maybe that's something else that will help drive maybe a little bit of that compassion that we talked about and just understanding in these interactions. Like you said, I'm not trying to not be offensive. I'm not trying to justify the actions. It's just, I think being more human with each other is important, especially in these times when the media is just trying to make everybody so angry with each other. You know, the government is trying to sow division a lot of the time. I think getting outside of yourself and being able to look at things from somebody else's perspective will only help.
Absolutely. What a great point you made about the institutions that are, I'd say, captured, that make it their business to sow division and create acrimony between individuals. And really, what it's all about, that I think you made a point in one of your first videos about breads and circuses,
Ah, yes.
and the distraction of and I remember that video vividly, and that distraction that is created by the unaccountable institutions. It's something that we need to pay attention to, especially when we deal with something as intense as medicine and healthcare. And at the same time, we do have to drive the point home that these things are not helpful in the sense that they are actually creating, first of all, bad blood, and second, they are creating a lot of waste and I would say bad outcomes. And this is not a matter of having a large data set, which we do have, by the way. I think we have to look at the basic mechanics of human interaction and just know that when we are caring for our own interests in an interaction between two people, and especially when there are great guardrails for that interaction, such as in medical interaction, the outcome is actually going to be, and this is not a guarantee, by the way. I mean, life is life, and we don't control most of anything, as you know. Most of things are out of our control, but we can control our actions. And when we control the majority of our actions, and we work in the best interest of what we're driving for, the doctor to care for the patient and provide great medical care, and the patient coming in to get better, I think that would be best served, that interaction, with nobody in the room besides the doctor and the patient.
Mm. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Man, it just seems like the more things have been pushed upwards to get responsibility and accountability away from the individual and push things upwards, it's also just made the sense of community get less. It's made the care about your neighbors get less. I've lived in places now and in cities where people don't even talk to each other, let alone care about each other. And it's just not, I don't think it's a healthy place for us to be. I think if we can do some of this deregulation and shifting back down to the state level and the more local levels, that people, I think, will get better outcomes. I think they're going to have a better sense of community. I think they will have more of that connectedness and not disconnectedness that we see so commonly now. But something that I kind of wanted to get into a little bit before we go would be, you talk a lot on your channel about simplicity, about removing of things from the process instead of adding something. People struggle a lot. And, in your field in dermatology, you've got people get marketed to constantly. If you look at television, if you look at Instagram and all these other places, it's what is the, newest whatever product, whether it's the newest scrubs, the newest, like, oil of Olay was the big thing back in the, 90s. I don't even know if they're probably still around, but
They are. They are
it's
doing
all
very
these
well.
huge corporations are, you have to aggressively scrub yourself, get a loofah, get, as much shower gel as you can, scrub the bejesus out of yourself. And then at the back end, they're like, hey, buy all of our synthetic products that are probably not good to be slathering over your largest organ. But they're like, hey, then moisturize your skin after you beat the hell out of it. And in general, it seems like we could just do less. And I was just kind of wondering if, people are watching this and they're like, man, I just have these issues. What would be probably a good first step for somebody that has like a skin issue or anything else? Is it to remove something from the process? Would it be to add something first? What do you think is the good first step for them when they're trying to figure that stuff out?
Yeah, I love that question, and you know what? I think it gels nicely with what we've been discussing. How we do have a lot this culture of adding more and more and more into the mix, hoping to fix what's broken fundamentally. And I think the first step, as I would suggest with the system that we're dealing with right now, with sensitive skin or with a skin issue, is first of all to back away, not to continue doing what you've been doing. It's obviously not working out, and a lot of people dig their heels deeper, obviously, and I don't blame them. There is, again, we talked about the institutions, and the corporations through the media and other avenues or other channels do actually preach to you to do more and more and more and more and compound your problem. So with sensitive skin in particular, I think sensitive skin is probably the most fundamentally common skin problem that people face, which is essentially a breakdown in the skin barrier and the inability of the skin to regulate itself in the face of external and internal stimuli or factors. That calls for, first of all, backing away from everything that you've been doing, and specifically if you've been doing things that you would know to abrade or to undermine the skin barrier that is the hallmark or the at the center of your problem, then you need to back away from those. Now, obviously, you need to learn how to do that, and a lot of people don't really understand the cost effectiveness of most of what they do in skincare. Obviously, you need to educate yourself about what is really beneficial to you in skincare, and I would venture to say that upwards of 99% of skincare is not beneficial to people. And if I were to have it my way, most people would not use any skincare. They don't need skincare for the most part. They just need to live their lives and focus on their life and their tasks. But backing away and, first of all, doing no harm like a doctor would be the first step. And then obviously knowing what it is that specifically is the problem, meaning, is the skin barrier compromised? If the answer is yes, there are things that you can do to mitigate that. And then knowing when to stop is another thing that I think is so important for people, because we're such a great culture, in so many different ways. We're a culture of trailblazers, a culture of independent and independently minded people who want to take matters into their own hands. And I think that's actually great. And most of the time it works out. However, when it doesn't work out, and you need to kind of educate yourself on when is it time to call it quits. And I think a lot of us have been in a situation where it's calling it quits is really tough to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's important to call, and really seek the help of somebody who actually a third party or a second party's perspective of what's happening there. And that's where I come in as a dermatologist, I think, and that's one of the reasons why I give people a whole paradigm to work their way into really taking care of themselves, from the first do no harm business to maybe mitigating things a little bit with, if the skin barrier is compromised. You can definitely use a moisturizer on the skin to mitigate some of that, protect the skin, and let it start itself back up to maybe create those very precious skin barrier ingredients and replenish itself. But when that doesn't work, and obviously there's different time frames for each situation, and there's different red flags for each situation for you to notice, I think that is, and I know it sounds a little bit abstract, but you could definitely look into some of the videos that I've put out there in more detail, that this is something that requires a little bit of nuance, but at the same time, do no harm, try to mitigate the situation to the best of your ability, and know when to call it quits, and really, call a telephone friend or go seek professional advice from somebody who could actually help you out. I think those are the hallmarks of working out any skincare issue, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, because you see a lot of people, I think, assume that, oh, I have an issue with my skin. I need to clean it more, or I need to scrub it
Mhm.
more. When, like you
Absolutely.
were saying, if you've been doing that your whole life and it's just getting worse, maybe you're scrubbing it too much. Maybe you're cleaning it
Mhm.
too much.
Yep. And if we want to get specific here, and this is something that I really appreciate the tee up. So the skincare culture revolves around two major practices: abrasion, which is to remove skin barrier elements from the surface of the skin by means of hot water, soaps, detergents, cleansers, body gels, shower washes, whatever you want to call them, anything and everything that's supposed to clean your skin from the big bad oils, gunk, pus, bacteria, and dirt. And then there's the physical abrasives that are designed to pots and pans your skin even more, to abrade more of the skin barrier. Again, most of these products have virtually no proven benefit. I'm not talking about washing your hands to prevent the spread of infection. That is a real legitimate thing in the right context. But I'm talking about the head to toe approach that most people in the West take nowadays, and even outside the West. And then there is a second component to this. Once you've abraded your skin and removed most of the skin barrier, you are called upon to use a whole category of products that are called moisturizers, which are essentially protecting what's left of your pore skin barrier after you've abused it with the pots and pans routine, and supposed to let it do its job, or start back up from scratch and start producing whatever was there to begin with. So it's sort of this hamster wheel of busy work where people just create their own work. It's almost like a skincare bureaucracy, if you will, that
And
that
it's like
people
a
kind of
cult, it's
just.
like a cultive routine also. Everybody has
It
been
is.
indoctrinated into, if you don't do these things, you're going to be the stinky kid, right? So like you must
Right.
do these things or else. What would you say to that though? Cuz like that's most people's argument about why they need to scrub and why they need to use soap and why they need to do
I
every
know.
day. Every day they're like, I have to do this. I don't want to be the stinky kid.
I know. Yeah, this is welcome to my life. So what most people don't realize, and I love telling them that, even though some of them still are pretty dogged about it, but the truth of the matter is that body odor is not made over most of the body. The body odor is made over the skin folds. It's made over the armpits, the groin, the butt crack, maybe under the breasts and people with pendulous breasts, but that's pretty much it. Meaning the face does not make body odor, the arms do not, the legs do not, most of the torso does not, and the scalp does not either. So washing with lukewarm water alone, for the most part, will actually eliminate whatever's ready to come off, whatever oils are rancid or just ready to dislodge from the surface of the skin, whatever dead skin cells that people really do a solid to the skin and try to really get rid of those dead skin cells. Those dead skin cells, when they're good and ready, they're being shed for you 24/7 for free, and washing will get rid of a little bit more of whatever's ready to come off. But it will not get rid of body odor, except for the body odor under the skin skin folds, which you can get rid of with soap if you have very strong body odor. I know plenty of people who actually don't use soap over those areas because they're not bothered by it. Either they don't care, which is fine. I mean, this is a matter of your own personal life, or they just don't have very strong body odor. I actually have more than a few patients who told me this is before even having met me. We're like, yeah, I don't really use soap under the armpits. I live alone, or, I don't have strong body odor. I'm like, to each his own. This is fine. There's no medical benefit in doing that, by the way. This is polite society stuff. This is sprinkles on top.
Well, I mean, we used
So,
to not
yeah.
bathe at all, and they would just wear perfume.
Right, right. Well, sometimes you could put a Band-Aid on things, that's for sure. So, yeah, so
But yeah, so it sounds like also this is another thing where like being healthier would actually be more advantageous. You have fewer skin folds to worry about stinking.
absolutely. Such a great point, and I do actually so I'm of the mind that obviously I'm responsible for telling my patients the truth. And when somebody comes into the clinic and their problem is directly related to obesity or to increased body weight, it's on me to tell them exactly what the problem is and actually give them advices for how to lose weight and encourage them. And this is a matter of their own health. This is my job and my task to tell that person, hey, this is affecting your health. This is, by the way, not only a skin issue, obviously, but from my perspective, they come to me with conditions that affect the skin folds, for example. And those conditions are clearly adversely affected by being overweight. This is something that's on the agenda to tell them this is something you need to do. And you know what's amazing is this is the beauty of patients. Patients come in, I'd say very few patients come in not motivated to get better.
Yep.
And when people come in and they hear a piece of advice that is reasonable and that is sensible. Even the don't wash from head to toe, which, a lot of people look at it at first and are like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 70, 80 years, some of them.
Yep.
They do listen to reason, but especially when it comes to weight loss, you know how many patients are grateful to hear that from a doctor to tell them this is your life and you need to make it better and you can make it better. And many patients come in actually already having lost weight, already put in the effort, and they need that encouragement
Yep.
and they need that direction and that mirror to show them that this is actually making your situation worse. And by taking the steps that you're taking right now and will continue to take, you'll actually get better, which is great. Less skincare for you.
And there's so little true honesty left anymore in our culture because everyone's so worried about offending everybody that they just walk on eggshells instead of
Yeah.
just being honest. And I think that's important to understand is that physicians aren't doing that from a place of shame. They're not doing it from a place of malice. You're actually trying to give them good advice. You're giving them compassion by being honest and telling them so. But society just wants to take away that person's individual responsibility and autonomy. And they want to try and say that you're bad for pointing it out. And they want to try and tell them that they're healthy in whatever size they are. And I don't think that, like you pointed out, I don't think we're serving the patient by doing that. It might make them
No.
feel good for a few seconds, but I think we all know that when you leave, somebody lied to you and that you're still in a situation that is not going to help you. So I think it's very important to do, like you said, is to be honest and compassionate and to give them actionable advice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only that, I can't think of a single person who would actually feel good for being lied to. And people are not stupid. People are highly intelligent and they come in and they expect to get advice in the quality that they have invested into the interaction. They do not expect to get bullshitted. And people are happy to get advice. Never, I got to tell you, I cannot recall a single, and it's so funny because you're talking about, or strange because you're talking about this societal push to engineer or to restrict and limit the discourse between two individuals. And I don't know of too many physicians that have actually taken this up and have done that. Actually, any physician that I've spoken to said, no, I tell my patients to lose weight when that's an issue. And I'm so grateful that we haven't. This is almost an implementation of a cultural policy trying to restrict and to rein in that interaction. But that interaction is so important in that telling the patient to do anything that is reasonable for and is helpful to their health is exactly what I'm charted or what I'm tasked to do. And that's my job. That's something I have to do. And anybody coming into the room, people know that they're being lied to. If I don't tell them the truth, they're going to know about about it. And never in my life, by the way, have I come across I cannot recall. I've been practicing for many years, many years. So I've practiced in many different types of forums and different types of settings since the beginning of the 2000s, and I cannot recall a single time that I've given a patient advice about changing their lifestyle and met with anything but gratitude. Never, never in my entire life. Lose weight, cut cut carbonated beverages, cut processed foods, anything and everything. People know that they need to eat your mother's food, for example, for kids who come in
Yep.
who drink soda and eat candy bars.
Ugh.
Even those kids are they've never rolled their eyes at me. They always know that this is the right thing to do, and they know that I genuinely care for telling them that. So they have never ever dismissed what I tell them with anything but. Obviously, the levels of gratitude differ. People express it differently. That people have never rebuffed it or looked at it disfavorably ever.
Yeah, which is good to hear because if you would pay attention to what like the mainstream media says frequently would be you would assume that any advice to that effect would be met with anger or some kind of dissatisfaction. Like they constantly
Never.
want to push that message that if you dare tell the truth to somebody in that situation that you could hurt them, that you could make it worse. And like you pointed out, your job is to do no harm. And I think that people know when you're lying to them and you are harming them when you do that. So yeah, it's very good to see that honesty is still the best policy. As that
It
fun
sure
saying
is.
goes. And it's good to hear that, you're not getting any pushback or any resistance from them and that they're willing to take that advice. I think that's really good.
Yeah, it's excellent. And you know what? And I wish that anybody who thinks, if there are some physicians out there who actually are operating under that assumption that they need to tiptoe around patients and not deliver the sincere truth to their patients and actually give them their best, I think that that's something they need to know, that people want to hear the best from you, and the best is not necessarily the best of news or the most platitude or the most flattering piece of poetry you could come up with. It is the truth, and it's something that's going to help them make their lives better and ease their suffering. That's what they want from you as a physician. By the way, that's probably across the board beyond physicianship, but obviously they come to you with an ailment when you're a physician. So that's clearly that's what's at stake here. People want to hear the truth, and sometimes, by the way, you never know how many years of their lives a person like that has walked around, and everybody's been tiptoeing around them. What do you know about their lives? You don't know anything about it. And you may be the one person to tell them, hey, this is what you do, this is what needs to happen, and you can help them out and actually show them and give them some directions for how to do it. That's priceless, and that's so important to do.
Oh man, that really touches home. And maybe we can kind of finish on this thought. But in church and in life, I've noticed that people respond very well to an honest sharing of a struggle. And if this can help a physician, if this can help a patient out there understand that it is important to just share openly and honestly and compassionately, that when I've shared struggles of mine and it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to be honest with people a lot of times when they're in a situation like that requires a change of lifestyle. But that you're not the only person dealing with that. You're not the only person going through that struggle. But we are always made to believe, and this goes back to that division on isolation, we are always told that we are probably the only one dealing with a problem. We're the only
Mhm.
one that is uncomfortable talking with a patient. We're the only one that is overweight, right? We're the only one that doesn't like going to the gym. We all know that's completely false. But it isn't until you hear somebody else share honestly and openly a struggle they've had that you start to realize that even in a very small room, you can be one of many dealing with that problem. It's just nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants
Right.
to be honest about it. And so I think it is really important to kind of share these stories and be open and honest with people. If I go to a doctor knowing that, hey, that doctor is probably uncomfortable telling me this, but I should be appreciative that they are because it's what I need to hear to fix the problem I have. Because to go to a doctor who's afraid to tell me the truth and I put pressure on that person as the patient and they decide not to be truthful with me in that visit and I go home and my problem doesn't resolve, I'm upset, my problem's not fixed, and I'll probably
Mhm.
go to a different physician. And that
Mm.
other physician is probably going to do the same thing instead of just being honest with me because I, as the patient, showed up in that situation and put pressure on that physician. Yeah, emotions run high, especially on the patient's end. And I think you and I both understand from our experiences as well as our jobs that, yeah, our emotions when it comes to doing your job or performing the tasks you need to do, they don't really matter much.
No,
You got to,
it don't matter at all.
yeah, they really, true. Just again, being honest with people is important, right?
Yeah,
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 the emotions
yeah,
when things need getting done, yeah, they don't matter. You just do the thing. I spent way too much
absolutely.
time this week not sleeping because I had things that need doing. You just do it. People are like, I don't know
Yeah,
how you do it. How do you do it, Dr. BB, when you have something that needs doing? How do you do it? You just do it?
I just do it. I just do it. And if because if I don't do it now, I know that I'll have to do it later. It's gonna be done. It's gonna get done. And if I'm not doing it now because I don't feel like it, it's not gonna get done now. It will get done later, and it will get done with, maybe not under the most ideal of circumstances. So it's a good investment of my time. Not to care so much about how I feel about it in the moment. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't, but that's not really the issue. The issue is getting the stuff done.
Yep. It's a good point. That's a good point to end with. So I appreciate you sharing your time with us, Dr. BB, the rogue dermatologist. Thank you very much, Dr. BB. I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care of yourself, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Patriot Dad, for having me on. God bless you. Take care. I'll see you soon.
And thank you to those of you that made it to the end of this video. The discussion between Dr. Yuval Bibi and myself was a very good one. I learned an awful lot about how regulations and bureaucracy are impeding the doctor-patient relationship, as well as some of the things that we can do to simplify our routines. Now, that doesn't mean you don't ever need to wash or moisturize, but you can definitely cut down quite a bit on those things and just manage the things that you need to. If you do have places on your skin that need a little bit of moisture, you can always use Dr. BB Organics Butter Oasis Vegan All-Purpose Moisturizing Balm. Now, I've gotten quite a few good reviews from some of the women that I have given it to see how they enjoy the product. One of their favorite aspects is the cacao smell that it gives off, as well as how good it does at moisturizing their skin. Now, it uses only natural and vegan ingredients, but one of them is cocoa butter, which is where it gets its wonderful smell from. So pick some of that up if you need a little bit of moisture here and there. It can be used from head to toe. Use it sparingly, just enough to get what you need, and move on with your life. If you're looking for a way to support the channel, you can use our promotion code when purchasing products from coffeebrandcoffee.com. Go ahead and check out their full lineup of coffee, tea, and cocoa. Make a purchase there, use our promotion code when checking out, and a little bit of your purchase comes back to the channel, allowing me to provide you with more content. If you're looking to join the conversation, head on over to the Discord and chat with the other people there. You can also find me on X at patriotdad_USA, where you can find me participating in a weekly space with the Questionable Gardener and others every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can also catch me Saturday nights at 8:30 p.m. Eastern weekly for my weekly updates news live stream. I look forward to seeing you around. I look forward to interacting with you. And if you have a recommendation for a different video or topic you want to see on the channel, please make sure to leave it in a comment below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves, and God bless. Go ahead and check out one of the links on the screen now to either subscribe to the channel and see the rest of the videos of the channel, or one of the carefully selected videos that you may wish to see that YouTube has used its algorithm to select for you.